When I'm confronted with a situation where I feel unsafe, I think it is triggering back to childhood and things and so on. If I'm in a place where I feel like whatever I do isn't good enough, then there's something that makes you go, right, okay, me being me in this space doesn't work. I had a life event that made me go, something's got to change. And I have what I can only describe as an out-of-body experience. Everything in my body went hot. I started to lose it, for want of a better phrase. I knew at that point I had to do something different. So that's when I went to therapy.
My guest today turned her personal journey of growth, discovery and resilience into a mission to empower others. Raised in a working-class Irish household, her upbringing instilled in her a deep sense of determination that would fuel her 20-year career as a successful HR professional. However, after a life-changing late diagnosis of ADHD, her life shifted completely. Today, she's the founder of Advance Populus, a business where, as she puts it, she connects with her tribe to help them move forward where they're stuck, thrive where they're lost, and step into their power. Vicky Campbell, welcome to the Social Corner.
Thank you so much.
I always call you Vicky.
You do?
But it's Victoria, isn't it? But we don't.
It is.
We don't say that.
No.
Okay.
Only if I've been naughty, and that's not today.
Okay. No, definitely not. Welcome. Thank you for coming. And, this is kind of really monumental because obviously we've known each other for forever, it seems like.
Yep.
And, seen different things, different stages in life. But I really feel like it's not until the last 10 years that I feel like I've actually gotten to know you, even though we've been friends since first year 11 years old. Oh my God. I'm there.
Sacred.
So that gives it away because we met at school. We met in secondary school. And my first impressions of you were that I just always felt that you just had more spirit than everyone else. You just had more like, there was something about you just made me think, yeah, she gets it. And whatever it was at the time for me, but I just thought, I can talk to this girl. I know she just knows, she knows the music. She knows what I'm talking. There was just something there. And I wonder, do you think back to those times and do you kind of identify anything specific in yourself that you can think, I've always been like this or I've always known this about myself at all?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned about being at school. I think I felt alone for a lot of it, but not in a really random way. So I felt that I really enjoyed not necessarily being with myself, because actually I hated being with myself. I loved being with others. I loved connecting with other people. And actually I loved variety of people. I'd always learnt from my household, from my upbringing, to embrace everyone, which is wonderful. But I had almost like a desire to go beyond the standard people that were in my sphere and just connect with as much people as possible. I described myself as a child of Switzerland, because I had lots of different pockets of friends that were in different tribes and doing different things, whether it was the acting with the drama stuff or music or whatever, or, making dance routines in the middle of the dance floor, or the people that they thought that were big, bad and scary. We remember a few of those, but just being in all the spaces made me feel good.
And you mentioned, you say you felt alone. What? Because you're not an only child.
No.
So you grew up with your parent.
I did.
Where did that alone feeling come from? Because as I remember it, you were busy, but you were everywhere. You were doing the things. You were in the school plays.
I was.
Every year. That was drama, by the way. The big drama.
With kids out there, I was the first Glinda. I'll say that. Okay. Yeah. Now I'd be Alpha, but I'm not going to lie. But yeah, it's. But I was about. But I think because that's where the loneliness came from. So at home, I've got a sister that's 8 years older than me. So when I'm at 8, she's 16, goes straight into work and she's out. So actually the aloneness comes from a busy working class. Everyone's out working, doing their thing. And then there's me. So sister's out, parents are doing what they need to do to keep roof over our head and so on.
Yeah.
and then there's me trying to find my way.
Yeah.
And actually growing up in a quite a restricted, risk-averse family where you can't go out and play outside, and just in case something might happen, and this worry that was this umbrella of my kind of being and household.
Yeah.
Feeling that you've got to kind of stay in.
Yeah.
So actually that's where the isolation probably came from. Hence, when I was out and at school and things like that, I'd want to be in all the spaces because I didn't want to be alone.
Was it a strict household? That's what I'm kind of picking up, where you can't go out. Was that coming from, because your background, your parents' background, they're Irish, they're Catholic, they're Catholic upbringing. Was it coming from that, or was it something else?
So I think it's an interesting one, because I class myself as not necessarily holding a religion purely because I feel like I've removed myself from that because of the upbringing and the belief system. So my dad really was the dominant force in our house. What he said went kind of vibe, and that absolutely would still be the case. And I think that's come from a place where he's quite a fearful person. So he doesn't really put himself in confrontational spaces. He doesn't really speak up for himself.
Right.
But he is quite a dominant force, like I say. So in seeing that, in hearing that, always made me sort of retreat and be like, oh, okay, something may happen. And even language like, oh, well, Vicky can't do that. So I used to have a fear, for example, of like open stairs, where there's gaps in between stairs. Vicky can't do that. So let's, rather than encourage and say, do you know what, you can, and there's nothing to worry about, and so on, as I would be with my children now.
Yeah.
Then everything was very much she can't do that, so don't put her in that space. And that kind of language of almost suppression, I will use that word, which was hard, because actually I'm wrangling. I always knew in my mind, you mentioned earlier about what was different for me, this wrangling between, I know that this is what you're portraying that life is, but me really knowing that it isn't, but not really having the power and the opportunity to do anything about it when I was so young.
The conversations that I have now with like my peers, like people in our age group, and I think what really translates to me is this lack of agency that we had like, as children. You're just kind of living in an environment that you have to adapt to. You don't fully understand why it's operating the way it is, and it's affecting you in so many ways, but you've just got to get on with it. And there's something to be said about this new generation that kind of like, if they don't like it, they're not taking it. Right. You know what I mean? But I feel like there's some balance kind of needed somewhere. Yeah. Because obviously, as a parent, you still have to, and you're a mother of two, you still have to have an element of, I don't know, control's not the right word, but say so over what's taking place. But it's that, what would you say you needed at that time that you didn't get?
Wow, big question. I feel like I needed to be seen, because I feel like I fit what everybody needed at that point. And then I fell in line with what was required rather than there was a space for me. So I talk a lot at the moment with the work that I'm doing to try and unpick a lot of these things about being seen, being heard, having an opportunity to have a voice. And I just didn't, in the nicest possible way. I just didn't. And being in an environment, I talk about this kind of forceful nature, you don't really know what you're coming into. So actually 1 minute it could be warmth and embrace and emotion and kindness and so on, but then the next minute it might be quite fraught and quite tense and quite aggressive in some kind of ways. So not really knowing what you're walking into builds a fear, a natural fear inside of like fight or flight continually, not really knowing where you stand. Yeah. So unpicking that in later life is really difficult. Yeah. And I speak to so many people, whether it's peers or otherwise now, that have had that very thing happen. But I was doing it not only with all of that context, but as I said earlier, alone. So not really knowing. So it was quite a confused stage of my life, to be fair. Yeah. Not really knowing what to do to be psychologically safe.
And I'm going to come back to it, because authenticity is a really big point for you now, especially in what you're doing.
It is.
And showing up as your true self, as you say, which is all the colours and all the things, as you put it. And is that stemming from the fact that you couldn't have been well, or did you even know who you were? You say you didn't know, but
Yeah, I mean, I knew that something was going on inside that was differing from what I was able to have opportunity to present. And I think I dabbled with things. So I chose subjects. So I did dance, I did drama, I did music, I did all creative subjects because I knew that that was my natural strengths and there wasn't any adversity to that. But there wasn't any adversity to that because that played to my parents' strengths because they were creative people. So I think, again, I was able to do what I wanted to do in that space because it fit in what the expectation and their experience. Whereas if there was something that I wanted to do that differed from that, I wouldn't necessarily take that opportunity or fight against it or speak up because I knew it wouldn't fit the mould. That's why I'm so keen now to be me, regardless.
regardless of anything. One of the things I've found so interesting when we talk is this total awareness that you have now, or articulate now, of how different you felt growing up, and as though something was wrong or something felt different. And I guess that's because that's not how you presented to me. Even when I think back now, knowing everything I know, you did not present as somebody who felt different or felt like something was wrong. And I'm just wondering, how were you coping at that point? Going through secondary school, because this is obviously the period I'm talking about, 11 to 16, you know, you're saying that you could feel something was slightly. How were you coping at that point?
I think it's just, I described the phrase self-preservation. I think I was putting myself in spaces that I knew I could keep well. So all the things I would want to do now and where I could find opportunity to do that. So being with friends, presenting in a way that was positive because that's how I wanted to feel. So I think today we would call it manifestation and affirming and all those kinds of great and wonderful language that we can ground ourselves with now. In not having those tools, I was able to go, right, okay, so what does make me feel happy and regulate myself in a way that felt comfortable. Again, not knowing what regulation was. If I felt panicked and so on, I would often be the child that would take themselves off and be really emotional. I cried a lot. Whether people saw it or not, you know, it needed a slight word of what I felt was criticism that didn't fit any level of positive nature towards me, and I would lose my mind. You know, it would be like the world had absolutely ended. And how did I go against that? That was like, right, okay, people pleasing. What can I do to make people like me, to fit in? I often find, and again, you mentioned I've got 2 children. I speak to my eldest who's 9 and say, like, the main thing that I wanted to do as a child was to fit. I didn't want to be unique. I didn't want to stand out. I didn't want to be anything that would show me above the parapet in any way, unless I was on the stage and being somebody else, which was quite interesting. But if I was in those spaces, I just wanted to fit, just wanted to be. Whereas, and I try and explain to her, as you get older, you are going to want to be yourself, and whatever that looks like. It might not fit the mold of someone's expectation of you, but how wonderful might it be if you could bring that into your world now? So if you have sensory overload, which she does have sometimes, or if you do want a bit of quiet time, or if you want to speak up, you do it. You do it. You know, here's teachers, here's me, is what I describe, because I'm like, actually, I'm trying to give you the tools that nobody was there to give me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And how do you see her receiving that? Like, what's that done for her?
I think her confidence has increased as a result of me having those, what I would call, real conversations. It's only really in recent times when I feel like she's mature enough to receive that kind of conversation that I've seen a difference. And then she's been able to tell me what she wants and needs. So we often have conversations, you know, in this moment when she is having these really emotional outbursts, masked at school all day, you know, institution that is school, and then come home and can be herself, which often I would find I wouldn't necessarily have my space to be that kind of free. Now she's got that freedom. She can say to me, like, this is what I need, Mama. In those moments, she might take herself off to have a little, you know, bit of time for herself, or she often puts her earphones on, even though it's not plugged into any kind of a device. just to kind of regulate and find a way that works for her. Now, I'm not a medical professional. I don't know exactly what she needs in those moments, and we're figuring it out just now, but it leaves me with a sadness for myself, in the sense that wouldn't it have been wonderful if I could have had somebody who was giving me the space to be seen, heard, and give me what I needed in those moments. But I'm just so pleased. Do I get it right all the time? Absolutely not. You know, as a parent, we're striving every day to do our best. And that's what my mum always used to say to me, I do my best.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it have been wonderful if she'd have been furnished with the tools to give me at that point?
Well, I suppose that's life, isn't it? What we've experienced, hopefully our children don't experience what they experience. Hopefully, you know, it's that just giving it something, a leg up to the next generation every time, isn't it? So there's so many things I think, oh, I wish this was different, but actually now I can teach it, you know, pay it forward. So I totally hear what you're saying. And you mentioned your daughter wearing a mask, but it's actually something I was going to ask you about, whether you'd say you developed a mask to manage, and when did you realize you had it on? And if you did, when did you realize that you had it on? Was there something that significantly happened that made you say, this isn't me?
I feel like it's happened on multiple occasions in my life. So yes, I feel like I always knew that I had a mask. I don't even think I had one mask. I feel like I had multiple. Multiple masks, depending on who I was with and how I felt I needed to show up to fit. So if I say in school, my mask would drop if I was in a creative space. So I always knew that there was a link between doing something creative and that connection with who I am. So there's no coincidence why I've fallen into, or, you know, have chosen a path of being with people and, you know, kind of helping people in that kind of sense, because I do feel that's a creative flair. But I feel like masking, again, came from this self-preservation and trying to keep well moments. But I'd say moving forward in life, I feel like in career moments where there's either been criticism, or so if I take my first job, for example, there was a particular experience where somebody had said, you know, oh, you're quite intimidating. Really? I mean, in the grand, you know, I'm many things. I don't believe I'm intimidating. I think I'm honest. I think I'm, you know, forthright and so on. And there are examples where I've learnt to speak up, or I've been brave and courageous in speaking up. And when I do step into that and I receive a negative reaction or something that is deemed as a criticism, I used to retreat. And that's where the mask would come in, because then it's a case of, right, okay, I'm unsafe now. So I need to put that mask back on and I need to fall in line, because if I don't, something bad's going to happen.
So you were trying to fit again.
Exactly.
Right. And that, I mean, your first job, how old are you at that point?
19.
So is this something you're just doing automatically, or is it like you're thinking about it and doing it? How's that working?
I think it's when I'm confronted with a situation where I feel unsafe. I think it is triggering back to childhood and things and so on. If I'm in a place where I feel like whatever I do isn't good enough, then there's something that makes you go, right, okay, me being me in this space doesn't work. And therefore I've got to try and adapt with what they need in order to fit in this space.
Because that's how you felt?
Yes.
As a child?
Yes.
Yeah. These feelings that started to present, how did they show up in your personal life? Because I'm kind of getting a sense of how they were professionally or academically. But what about personally? I mean, you've been married now for...
Married 10 years, together 22.
22 years, and you met your partner at college?
I did.
Yes, you met your husband at college. So it's been a long time.
Yep.
Lovely man. Did it show up in the stages of your relationship, or are you happy to share?
I'm happy to share, yeah, of course. So we met when I was 17. We were at college, and I think there was an imposter syndrome going on for me at the time as well, because he was a sought after commodity, shall I say. He was from London, he had this lovely accent, he looked particularly hot, and but something in me, in that presenting myself to him and be like, hello. I think I actually shouted at him, because it was like, it was more of a hello moment, which we laugh about, and I said it in my wedding speech. And the reason being, I feel like in that sort of 16, 17, 18 stages of my life, I started to be a little bit braver. Not in every space, but again, I'm at college, I'm with friends, masks starting to slip slightly because I'm doing some creative subjects, I'm in that kind of bit more comfortable environment. So then I'm starting to be a bit more me, a bit more bold, a bit more me. And from us being together from quite early stages, when I felt trust in our relationship, that's when the meanness came from. So the emotion is what I would say. Like I say, I talked about earlier about crying a lot. If I felt that we'd have a disagreement, I mean, everybody, has a disagreement. My first standing point would be, okay, I'm wrong, you're right. What can I do to fix it? Because that was how I'd always been. And I'd say, to be quite honest, first 5 years of our relationship was a lot of that. We had some great times and we really connected and so on. But I did have this niggle because I knew I was masking a lot.
Right.
I wouldn't necessarily label that because I didn't really know what was going on for me, but I knew I wasn't being true to who I was all of the time. Still living at home with parents, we're still quite young. Whilst I was in that phase, I always thought to myself, is this going to work? Is this really my person? Because actually, I'm not really myself all of the time around this person. And we did have a moment. So in that, after 5 years, we did have a moment that I did retreat and say, I'm not sure this is going to work.
And you stepped back.
I did. At this point, we were living together.
Right.
And I stepped away for a period because I said, do you know what? I feel like you're taking me for granted because you really know that I'm not being my true self here and you're allowing it to happen. And absolutely, is that on me for doing that and making those choices? Absolutely. But I do feel that there was a part that he was also playing in that to allow me to be not that person that I am.
How would he have known that you weren't being your true self if that's not something you'd shown him before?
I just feel like in my vulnerable moments, in our real conversations, I had explained, I had shared, and so on. So when I would go into the people-pleasing mode and the apologetic mode for apologising for the sake of, and there's no real reason to, there was limited sort of connection back to say, do you know what, Vic, that's not on you, and the imbalance was there.
Yeah.
But retreating was the best thing I ever did because it made us much stronger.
Right.
He awoke and had a moment that said, do you know what, yeah, absolutely. And ever since then we've been that bit more connected because we had that moment.
I think this is going to be so helpful for so many people because I think your experience, though unique to yourself, isn't unique in general. Because it's just so familiar, some of the things that you're talking about and some of the things I've heard, even some things I can think of myself. And what amazes me about your journey is that all this is happening, but you still managed to have this mega successful career in HR. Really impressive, working in the corporate, I can't even ever say this word, FTSE 100.
Yeah.
It's a 250 space, which is essentially a people space.
It is.
So on one hand, there's the drive to be with people, work with people, and do all of that and be open, as you said. But then there's the other side of it where, well, you're exposed to so many different wants and needs and ways in which people want to be pleased. How do you then start to navigate yourself in that space? So what drew you into that space and what kind of sustained you, I suppose, as you went through?
It's an interesting story. So I'd applied for varied universities and had a pivotal moment in my home life where my mum and dad split up. 18, mum and dad split up. I'm about to, consider, I've got these options of universities. And then life happens. So as soon as that hit, I then realised I've got to bring money into the house.
Right. Okay.
Dad's about to exit stage left and we need to still pay the mortgage. So I gave up going to university with a view that I needed to bring money in the home. So actually, I fell into a career is what I would say. So I thought I need to earn money. So I literally signed up to a bunch of agencies, took whatever was coming just to try and, I've never been in this space before. The best I'd had is pipping a till in Tesco's at college to earn a bit of pocket money. But, and I fell into recruitment. I say fell. I'm not sure it was. I feel like it was like meant to be this like ordained experience of me being in the world of recruitment, because for me, recruitment was the closest thing I could find to acting, to being in a performance space.
Wow.
I observe your expression. It's because if you think about it, what is a recruiter? A recruiter is they connect the left and the right to talk to each other so that they can go on to be the best versions of themselves in this brand new career. And I thought, do you know what? That speaks to my values. And actually that's going to get me out of bed in the morning and feel like I'm building the same energy I would if I was on stage and performing and, have that audience. Because the connection to that, I would say, is the applause.
Right.
So if you think about recruitment, there's an end story that has somebody that then goes and fulfills this fantastic career because they've chosen, and I've helped facilitate that journey. What was I doing when I was on the stage? I was performing in front of a crowd that would clap and receive, and they're getting something out of something that I've done.
Yeah. The payoff for you, I think I'm understanding, was the applause. Is that right? Would you say?
Do you know what? Yeah, in the crudest sense, I think that's how it started. So recruitment was very much that. I felt pride that I'd been able to facilitate someone moving forward in their life, in their career, and so on. That's part of HR, right? It's then went into much wider remits from there, but I think that's certainly where it started for sure.
So when you didn't get that payoff, what would happen then?
So I learnt to find it in other areas. So things like I would get pleasure from giving someone the no. So actually, when you go for an interview and you're unsuccessful, actually telling someone the reasons why, helping them, staying connected with them. So I had really good relationships because I used to direct source people rather than use agencies, all those kinds of things. The reason why I did that is because I wanted to give someone the all-round experience. So you're not successful for this one, might be the next one. Let me help you understand why. I wasn't ever going to be someone that was going to be happy in being a bum on a seat person and that sort of, you mentioned transaction, that tick, 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 tick. It was about the experience. So if I couldn't find it in the success for someone, it was actually, okay, so you haven't got the role, but here's all the things that you could do to improve. So I almost became more of a relationship person and find some connection somewhere to help someone. There was always an element of helping someone in the end.
Wow, okay. At what point did you start to consider whether this was essentially the right space for you to still be in?
I think the journey led me from recruitment into people advice. So I had to do all the nitty gritty, what people class hardcore HR of escorting people from the building and investigations and all those difficult conversations. I almost played around with how far am I going to take this? Am I always going to be a recruiter and have this happy conversation over here? Or actually, am I going to what I would call grow up a little bit, have more adult conversation, difficult nitty gritty, challenge myself in a different way? And there was a desire from me. So I'd left home now. I'm with a partner that now sees me. I'm now feeling more comforted that I can be a bit more me outside of work.
Yeah.
So bringing that into the day job was helpful because that enabled me to explore different elements of HR and gain different skills. Even things like the fact that I didn't go to uni, so I didn't get that degree. Well, can I do that in the workplace? So I challenge myself and push myself to do further education and qualifications. So I do host all of those qualifications now, which is awesome.
Excellent.
But the reason I did that was for me.
Right. What do you mean?
So I feel like even maybe originally I was probably going to university because it was the right thing to do, rather than necessarily I was
Right.
following a specific dream.
Right.
I think I started to feel a bit more empowered in following my voice and so on. I'm still dealing with the emotion when I get home and the demasking and all of that
Yeah.
great and good stuff. But there's still that I've lit a fire in myself at this point of my journey, and I want to do better for me
Right.
and to grow. And this kind of passion has always been inside, and I feel like at this point I was a little ebb of a fire,
Yeah.
and now we're starting to grow.
Starting to grow. Okay. I think what's striking me in this conversation is your ability to look back and understand what was going on, not just understand it, articulate it, identify it, explain it, because it's very clear to me, as you're explaining to it. And I wonder, is that just naturally you, or is that some of the therapy? Because you talk quite openly about doing the therapy. Has that enabled you to be able to do this, or where's that coming from?
I think I always had the ability to do it, but I never necessarily had the confidence in order to share it. What I think that therapy, and it's a variance of different guise, whether that's cognitive behavioural therapy known as CBT, or later in what I would describe as proper counselling. So true therapy with a psychologist. I'm still with a psychologist now. It's the best hour I spend money on every month to be able to share. I've learned to build my toolkit to be able to vocalise, express, share. I still have a confidence voice that comes in my head that goes, oh my goodness, if you say this out loud, what's that going to mean for you? So this worry never really goes away, but it's about how I can manage it and how I can stay regulated in those moments. But I am a reflector. So to your point, I believe one of my superpowers is about seeing all the things, seeing it for what it is, seeing what you might be perceiving of me when you're talking to me just now. But again, tuning into all of the exterior, so everyone that is sort of in the room with us just here, what they might be hearing, seeing, perceiving of me is always on my mind.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
That's how, and I say that's a lot because in recent years, I'm still learning to let go of what people think, because I cannot, if I know what everybody in the room's thinking or perceiving of me, I will just leave the room because they're all bound to have thoughts. How do you manage that? Is that something you switch off when necessary, or is it constantly on? And what effect does that have?
For me, it's always on. And what I've learned to try and do is pivot what I believe the answer to the question is. So if I say all of the people in the room have a view, some years ago it might have been, and that's a negative voice. So that's she can't do this, she's unprepared, she hasn't got it, we could do this better. Whereas I've learned over time to start to pivot that and go, yeah, they want me to do well. And even if they don't, so what? In the nicest possible way. Like, I'm hearing it, I'm noticing it. And I think that's the difference. And what I try and explain to people just now is notice it, like it almost like receive it in, but be accepting of it. I talk a lot about compassion. Be compassionate that they're in a different space from you. But do you know what? You can't control what they're thinking.
Very true.
Now, I say this because I've got positive energy today. I woke up in a good mood. All is well. When I'm not in that space and I feel like the world is sort of judging me
judging you
in that way, I don't necessarily have that view. And that's hard because I have to try and find a balance to bring myself back up to a positive stance. I don't think it's something that's going to leave me. And maybe that's where, I know we'll come on to talk about it, maybe that's where diagnoses come from, but learning a bit more about accepting who you are and sharing that with the world, regardless of what other people think, has almost been the back end of the journey. But yeah, it's been a step through to get there for sure.
It has. And I know therapy wasn't something that you just stepped into just quite, I mean, I can only talk from my first experience with therapy. I was actually recommended to a counsellor because I was going through a really crappy period, and was my sister-in-law actually that said to me, you know, I think this would be good for you. And it took me a while, but I set the appointment up and I went to this place and I said to the lady, she's amazing. I said to her, yeah, we don't do this. You know, we black people, we don't do therapy. And she was like, okay, so why are you here? And I was like, I don't know. And I sat there for an hour and it was kind of like the weirdest experience because I could not wait to get out of there. And I disappeared for like 3-4 months.
Yeah.
And she called me one day and she said, you haven't come back. And part of me always thinks, well, I'm sure people don't come back, but what made you call me?
Yeah.
And it was that phone call that made me go back. So it was just like, basically I'm saying it wasn't a smooth journey.
No.
I'm just going to go, we're doing therapy. You know, how was it for you? Because I know that it wasn't easy either.
So I had a life event that made me go, something's got to change. And that was, I had my very first, what I would to school call an overwhelming panic attack.
Right.
So I've just had my first daughter at this point. I'm married. And if I say to you, I bought my first home, got married, and had my first child in 18 months.
That's a lot of firsts in one.
Married, bought my first home, had my first child in 18 months. And it was within the first, I think I want to say she was 3 months old and there was a family function. It was in Gatwick. That's a decent drive away from where we are. And I'm like, right, okay, let's all get in the car and let's go. I'm driving down the motorway and I have what I could only describe as an out-of-body experience. Everything in my body went hot. I started to lose it, for want of a better phrase. I was shaking. I was at the wheel. In the end, my hands were bleeding because my nails were digging into my hands. I just uncontrollable.
Wow.
I couldn't open the window to get some air in because I couldn't loosen my hands on the steering wheel. All this pressure and this build-up of all the things I've just talked to you about almost like hit me like a ton of bricks.
Gosh.
No warning, no nothing. It just happened. My daughter's asleep in the back in the car seat, thank goodness. My husband, he's a Londoner. He can't drive. They tube it everywhere, right? So I've got no outlet. And yet again, I'm in a stage where I feel alone because it's on me to fix it. It's on me to get us to that destination.
Make it right.
And make it right.
Right.
Did I get off that motorway? No matter how many times my husband said, stop at the services, it's okay, don't worry, very supportive. No, I didn't, because I had to get there. I was doing 40 in the slow lane on the M25. I had lorries going past me. I've had trauma in my past experience where my grandparents were killed on the M42 in a tragic accident. Their car blew up and so on when I was 16 years of age. So with all of that that's in my backstory, I didn't know had sort of clearly been there hovering over me, and it just all came to the forefront in this journey to Gatwick. I got there, so I did it. Could I get home? Absolutely not. I had to get a family member to be on my insurance to drive us back home when we were ready to go home, because there was absolutely no way I was getting back in that car. Have I been on the motorway since? No. So,
yeah,
I knew at that point I had to do something different. So that's when I went to therapy. It was in a stage where it was like, I need fixing. I am broken. Something is wrong. My body is telling me that something is wrong. Hence, I started cognitive behavioural therapy. And you mentioned your almost resonance, is that the right word? That came to you in that I wanted to be there because I wanted to be fixed and I needed a professional to help me. I didn't want medication. My dad had suffered depression all his life. I didn't want to be taking medication by any stretch. I just wanted somebody to talk to me to be heard and be fixed. That was where I was.
Yeah.
But I tell you, the first thing that came out of my mouth when she asked me a question was about my dad. Had nothing to do with the car, had nothing to do with the fact I got married, all these things that I thought had led me to this point. It was about who I was as a child and how I had just tried to fit and be boxed in, and the fact that things were on me. So everything just came full circle at that moment, and that was the start of my journey of getting to know who I was.
Your dad is a very, we haven't really talked about him in this interview, but you know, we've spoken off camera. He's a very significant part of this, isn't he? In terms of understanding yourself and the panic and the fear, because there's the one part of learning who you are, but then there's the other part of feeling like you can be released into that because of the fear that you've described that you had growing up. Can you explain where that fear came from? What is it that you saw that started that?
I think it's Jekyll and Hyde. I think I mentioned earlier about not necessarily knowing how an atmosphere or surroundings was going to be. So therefore my behaviour adapted in accordance to what I was receiving. But if you think about it, you mentioned at the beginning, I've come from an Irish immigrant family. So, you know, if I take it from the yin and the yang, you know, the yin certainly being the positive, inclusive, fun-loving environment that was. And actually, I described my household as Irish. You know, we ate good food, we celebrated, we came together, you know, we came to Digbeth, the irony of where we're filming today, where we would celebrate being Irish and being connected, and it's wonderful. And I felt this real severe connection to that. But then you would get the other side where, unfortunately, because he hadn't done the work and because he hadn't been exposed to the support mechanisms that I'm tapping into as an adult, he was one of 10. He wasn't seen. He grew up, so he came over from Cork. He grew up in Aston. He was in a 3-bed semi, you know, toilet in the garden. They didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. Very deprived situation. Wasn't necessarily a skilled worker, so didn't necessarily have all the things. So that's his kind of core who he is. So his real way of being as a dad was very much, you know, you do as I say. And that's quite hard as a child because you're trying to find your way and navigate the world. So this innate fear of wanting to people please and be seen and be heard and so on just was so significant. And my mom was always out. She'd be at 3 jobs and doing all of the, you know, all of that. So I spent a lot of time with him. And it was very loving. So you would sit on his lap, you know, love. So he's very warm person, but then also very cold at times and very militant. You know, you would get your GCSE results and it would be, oh, good, but you know, it's only what I expect. You know, so nothing felt like it was good enough. And hence all of that started to creep in as an adult.
And so I get that there wasn't I don't know, I suppose what I'm picking up is that you didn't feel comfortable.
Safe. This psychological safety bit was really important. I didn't feel that. I wanted to feel it. I strived through it. And if anything, I went over and above to, you know, beg sounds like a really strong word. And I don't want to, you know, kind of diminish our relationship because, you know, it's an interesting one. We've got an interesting dynamic just now. But it was something that I constantly sought. And if I didn't get it, I'd failed. Like, why?
And
why
did you
didn't I
just
get
seek it from him or did you seek it from both of your parents?
Him.
What was it about him?
Because he was our family. He was the matriarch. He was the defining person in our household. So as long as he was okay, we were okay.
Right.
But if he wasn't, we weren't.
And there came a point where you and he were not okay anymore.
That's right.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, just as an adult, I think I decided, and through the work, so I'd started therapy and started to really unpick what I'd been and gone before. And yeah, we had some really honest conversations with each other about the fact that I felt that certain things weren't okay. Here's my boundaries. This is what I can accept and I can't. And we have a relationship now that is a bit more removed, and a bit more, disconnected on the basis of what you would see a true parental kind of child environment. And the reason that is because I'm listening to what I want, need. I've set my minimum criteria. And if he can't meet that, then unfortunately we're going to have to keep that kind of disconnect so that I can keep well.
What have you replaced him with?
My family. Because I think that I was missing when going through this journey was I was connecting acceptance and love and kind of who I am with my parents. Whereas by this point, I've had my children and I've had my family, and I'm connected with my husband, who I love dearly, and we've built this really good, solid foundation. I started to pivot away from what I felt I needed from the past and bring it to my present. So be more present with my now we used to describe ourselves as a triangle when I just had my first. With this positive square now that I have my second, and nobody can infiltrate our square. That's it.
What are some of the most impactful lessons that you would say you've learned then about self-love and authenticity that have come out of doing the work, as you've put it, whether that's been CBT or proper counselling, as you've mentioned, or just having that boundary that you've just described? What would you say are some of the most impactful lessons you've learned?
To really tune in and listen, because the answers are all there, in my opinion. All of the answers to all the things that are going on for you are there if you can learn to switch off and disconnect from other people's expectations of you and other people's view of the world, and even your own past view of the world. Try and really tune into today. What is it that you need? And give it to yourself. Give yourself permission to have those things. If I give you some examples there, so things like I've really started to connect with breath work. The power of being able to breathe. Really pause and breathe. Not into your chest and, really light, shallow breathing. This is where this panic and fear and expectation comes from. But really connecting with your diaphragm.
Yeah.
And really breathing and allow yourself to pause and stop. By gifting myself that, which I can do at any point of any day, that's been a real life lesson for me that goes, it's all here. It's all here. I've got it. And that's the thing. I've got a necklace on today, and on the back is a word which is trust. And I carry it with me everywhere, because a big, big life lesson to your question is to trust myself.
That's something we don't do as people, and especially as women. And we have an inbuilt intuition and mechanisms that actually help us navigate.
That's right.
And for so many different reasons, trusting ourselves is just something that we're not, I don't think that we do that well, but being able to do that now, if you were talking about percentages, how often would you say you're getting that right, or being able to trust yourself?
I'd say it was, 75, 80% today.
Good.
Yeah, which is a real positive number for me. I don't know whether I'll ever reach 100, because I think there will always be that niggle and that voice, and like I say, I'll dial that up and down depending on how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And it's a culmination of things, but I do genuinely believe that I'm in a much more positive place. Hence, I feel a bit more equipped to be able to share this experience with others and hopefully impact them. We say F it a lot in my sessions, because I'm just like, just throw all of those inhibitions away and be you today. This is not about, all of that extra baggage that we carry. I metaphorically bring it into like a backpack, when you're at school and you've got your pencil case and your books and your bits and your bobs. What is it that you've got in that backpack that you can't take out because it's a really big part of who you are? Like some of the things that weren't so great growing up, for example, they're all in my backpack, but I can choose how heavy they are. Are they light as a feather today, or are they big boulders that are going to cause me some really serious issues in navigating through life?
So looking at the research, it suggests that over 2 million adults in the UK have undiagnosed ADHD, which can obviously have really debilitating effects on their quality of life. And you have described obviously getting to know yourself from your early years to your teens to coming into your your adult years, so to speak.
Yeah.
How did you even know where to start or what to look for? Because you've gone to therapy. You
Mhm.
said, I want to fix me.
Yes.
How did fix me become, I need a diagnosis? Like, what happened?
So I did CBT, and that CBT, for anybody who hasn't tried it, is very much about being present, not catastrophizing about what hasn't happened yet or worrying about what's already been and gone, but staying in the moment, which is really, really difficult for somebody who's got ADHD, for anybody who's looked into the research, right? So because I found some tools, but I recognised quite quickly that those tools weren't really going to work for me. But what I did find in some of the gems of that wisdom was a bit more about, okay, so this is who I am. And I started to really tune into what was going on. I went hell for leather with my career. So I was really pushing myself and really starting to thrive. Like I say, I had a young daughter, really wanted to sort of provide, and I'd bought this house. We're going to pay the mortgage. I want to try and be aspirational and get up the ladder and all of those kinds of great things. I'd branched away from recruitment. I'm now into a big broader HR role, lots of responsibility. It's all wonderful. But with all of that being said, I still had this innate nature of people pleasing, over apologizing, constantly wanting to fit, and so on. So it's all going on. And when that was kind of happening, I almost came to a bit of a juncture of being burnt out. So at this point, I've had my second child. I had the whole year off because it was a little bit of an adventure trying to bring her into the world. Took a little bit of time. So when she did arrive and I had some time away from work, returning to the workplace was an interesting one because, again, being a new mother, whether you've had one child or 56, coming back into a workplace, having your sole role is being a caregiver to a new person into the world. Now you're back into the swing of the corporate world, particularly. It's a lot. This transition is a lot. So with all of that being said, when I first went back into work, I went to the doctors. I went to the doctors because I was, again, starting to tune into myself and thinking, what's really going on for me? And I wanted to explore that with a medical professional.
Yeah.
And in having that conversation, I mentioned, I don't know whether there's something neurodiversity that's happening for me. Can we explore that? So they said that they would put me forward for the referral that was. I'm still waiting on that, by the way. And that was 3 years ago. So yeah, that's that.
Wow.
And there's endless, years worth of lists for the NHS because of where we are in the world, unfortunately. About 9 months into being back into the workplace, overachieving, doing really well, go, million things, all the clubs, drop-offs, pickups, all the hats. I'd gone into a bit of a spiral of doing all the things, not listening to myself.
Right.
My body was, every time I'd have maybe a day off or a couple of days off, I would be ill because I would be on this come down of go, and all the time.
Yeah.
And again, if anyone looks into the traits, it would be this go, hyper-focus mentality. I've got to achieve. I've got to be the best. I can't fail. Otherwise, this consequence and this emotion's going to come over me. And I wouldn't allow that to happen and pushing through.
Right.
I got to 9 months in and I just had this overwhelming burnout.
Gosh.
So I took myself away from the workplace. I went into proper therapy. And in my very first therapy session, I had a call out to my therapist that said, I really do believe that there is something neurologically going on for me that is beyond just filling my time with lots of stuff and I'm burnt out. I feel like there's something there. And she could recognise that for me and almost gave me that validation and permission to explore that further, which is when I went through the private route and got a relatively quick diagnosis in a matter of weeks and months rather than the years that I would have been waiting for.
Yeah.
And in hearing a psychologist and psychiatrist say to me, this is what's going on for you, Vicky. This is the reason why you have experienced all of those overwhelming feelings that you've had was like a light bulb moment for me.
Wow.
Absolute light bulb.
You've described emotions like relief, grief and curiosity after your diagnosis, you know, just through our own conversations. The light bulb moment is that, does that contain those feelings, or was it just that aha? Or
No.
you know, what was that? What was in the light bulb?
The light bulb was very much, wow, this is the reason why this is happening for me. So it was an initial like eye-opening moment, but then quite quickly went to grief, because it was almost feeling sad for all of the years prior to. If only I'd have known what my full potential could have been. Part of that assessment is essentially looking at, did you feel in your formative years that you reached your full potential? And I would say no, because I didn't speak up. I didn't have that kind of openness that I've got now into the world. And if I had, what could I have been? You know, how might I have I presented, you know, and yeah, what could I have achieved? So this sadness of masking and so on. And I had this now toolkit. So the positive then, I was handed, I felt, this set of tools that could go, you know, this is masking, this is regulating, this is people pleasing. It's all of those traits have been handed back to me, and I recognise every one of them so deeply. When I describe emotions in the way that I do, is because when I feel something, I don't just feel it. Like, it's like a physical pain. So when I feel it, it's so inherent in me that it affects every part of my cells in my body, to, you know, to my toes, to my fingertips, to the hairs on my head. And that is so hard, but then it's also so magical. You know, if you look at, you know, taking it back to something, you know, that everyone can recognise, the film Inside Out talks about emotions and joy and sadness and all of those kinds of things. And there's a reason therapists use that as a tool when they're sitting in front of, whether it's children or adults. All those things are going on for someone all of the time. You go to Inside Out 2, you add in anxiety and overwhelm and so on. All of those things are kicking in all of the time. And I've had that hamster wheel continually all the way through my career and personal life. But now I'm learning to, really embrace who that is, how I show up, and therefore being able to, my instant reaction was, I need to give this to the world.
Right.
I know it, I accept it, I get who I am now, or I'm certainly on that journey. What do I need to do now? I need to stop.
I was going to, my actual next question was how, you know, how did you process it, and how have they influenced your next step? But to say it was your instant reaction, there was no kind of thought in between.
No?
You were just ready to, like, okay, I need to.
And I think this is back to the point earlier of, I don't feel like I've had a life that looked back towards me and was like, what does Vicky really want?
Right.
So I think I went instantly to, how can I give this gift that someone just handed to me back out there in the world? Whether that was the recruitment originally, or, you know, the over people pleasing and I'm really sorry and giving to people, whatever it was, it came back to that. That really is fundamentally who I am. You know, and actually I saw it as a negative before and something that was a weight for me. And again, I've tried to pivot that and go, do you know what? No, this is your gift. Your gift is to give your gifts to the world, because actually they are so needed. The NHS is on its knees. You know, everyone's waiting on lists and so on. Everyone has more information now that they've never had before. We didn't start to even look at diagnosis for women for the likes of ADHD until the early 2000s. It wasn't a thing. It was known as being a naughty boy syndrome, you know, that was looked at. So now that I've got all of that information, I feel like I need to spread the word, because I speak to so many different people, men and women, who feel exactly the same. And actually, if I can make them feel that they're not alone and they are seen and heard, wonderful. I feel like I've achieved, and that's what I get back.
And that gift has been packaged today in your business, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Advance Populus, because all of what you've been through has led you to be where you are today. And in 2024, you took a major leap. I think it was 2024.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. And left your career.
I did.
In HR.
I did.
this. And I think it's really important to say just how high up you were, like in terms of what you were doing. You were like working for a major HR, sorry, was it financial services company, and you left.
I did.
Said, I'm at the door, and set up your own business, Advance Populus.
I did.
And so I just want to, as we come into a close, just to understand a little bit more about what it is you do now and how all of this has led to the gift that you're giving to the world. So, but firstly, I just want you to explain the meaning and the reason behind the name. And what does it actually mean?
It's interesting. So in true ADHD style, I procrastinated for weeks over what the name was going to be, because I wanted it to be something that was impactful, that really meant something to not only me, but those that were going to be receiving it. So yeah, I went through many and varied names. I did decide I didn't want it to involve my name, because again, already I'm thinking this could be much bigger than just me.
Yeah.
And again, I think I saw that as being a selfish thing. I'm starting to pivot again over time of that's not selfish, it's selfless, and so on. So I tried to really, I talk about boiling the ocean. So we've got all these things that we're worried about and boiling it right down. Let's not boil the ocean, let's bring it down to one little droplet of water. Yeah. What am I trying to achieve here? I'm trying to achieve something where I'm sharing my gifts to the world. So I'm trying to do what? I'm trying to advance people. So I'm trying to help them move and make a shift as a result of working with me and using my gifts. So advance needed to be in there somewhere. So I was wedded on that. And yeah, I wanted to advance people. So then I was like, people, what's the different ways I can use people in this and so on. Right. And populus is the Latin word for people. Right. I then started to look at what does populus mean? It's the brand name of a tree. So again, what is a tree? It's got roots, it's got grounding, it's got this bark, it's got, stems of leaves and so on. And there's so many different varieties of populus in the world. So it's very inclusive because it looks at everybody. I didn't want to be somebody who only worked with females or only worked in that and so on. And I want to chat to everybody. I feel like this is something that everyone could do a little bit of support with.
And that is who you are.
It is
who you are. So, I mean, you've kind of explained what you're aiming to do, and it's for everyone. It's not just for people who've got ADHD. No. So, who would you define as your ultimate target audience?
It's so interesting. Yeah. Because I started with, well, it's everybody, isn't it? Because everybody needs to understand who they are. I think it's about people who feel stuck, people who have had challenges where they haven't been in tune with who they are. They want to connect with who that is again and want to allow space for that. So again, that can come through all sorts of variety of flavours and so on. But I want to work with people who are open to understanding who they are, how they show up, to let their guard down and be present in order to do that work to move forward.
I love the fact that you can just summarise it in that. So I still can't say what I'm doing all the time. I might have to talk to you, but no, that is brilliant. And I think, what's really inspired me about our conversation today is just how aware you are about you, about how you show up, about what you've experienced, what you've been through, and now what you're doing. Like there's a very comprehensive train of thought and understanding and I think that can only grow something major with what you're doing, and really affect and really positively, I should say, affect people in the spaces that you're in. So I'm really proud of you as a friend. And I suppose I just want to, it's coming to the last question now, because one of the things I ask all of my guests is how they envision their social corner in the next 5 years. What do they want to see? And I've just explained that the social corner, as much as having a social conversation, is also about having conversations that are sparking awareness, social change, having an impact on society in some way. And I think you sharing your story today about your adult ADHD diagnosis and everything you've shared is really, carving out a corner of society for yourself. So when you, in 5 years' time, think about what that corner could look like, What is it that you see? How do you define your social corner?
I see a bunch of people who genuinely have connected back in with self, who have embraced every part of them, warts and all. I think we shy away from some of that. And through, whether it's coaching, through workshops and connecting with others that are like-minded, I think it's about finding your tribe. So I would love to say in 5 years that I've fully found my tribe, that others that I've worked with have found theirs, that we can find ourselves in spaces more often than not, being authentic, being kind, being compassionate, and true to self, rather than over expectation, over worry, and something that society says that they should be. So I mentioned earlier about the effort, bit more effort, and a bit more, who you are, how you show up unapologetically.
Unapologetically. I like that. I like that. Vicky, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on today. This has been really good. We'll talk more off camera, obviously, but I just feel like I've learnt so much more about you, so much more. I've understood so much more, I should say. And I just feel like you're going to impact the world in that we haven't seen it yet. So I'm really excited for your journey going forward. Thank you for coming on the show.